Exile to Killa. The road to Killa stretched endlessly beneath Ishaan's weary steps. Dust rose with every footfall, clinging to his clothes like the burdens of his past. He was a man hollowed by grief, still carrying the memory of his wife's last breath. Since her passing, the world had turned gray, and though he tried to rebuild his life, every effort crumbled under the weight of sorrow. Debts followed him like shadows, and when the city offered no mercy, the only choice left was exile to the forgotten settlement of Killa. Killa was no place for the faint-hearted. Tucked between barren hills and restless winds, it was where people went either to escape or to vanish. Ishaan arrived with little more than a small sack and a heart too heavy to beat with hope. He did not know what awaited him there, only that it could not be worse than the silence of his empty home. It was Zahra who first crossed his path. She stood outside her modest dwelling, her posture sharp with vigilance, the kind of stance born from years of fending for herself. Ishaan, her son, clung to her skirt, his wide eyes filled with curiosity at the stranger who appeared on their worn threshold. Zahra's life was one of routine survival, fetching water, tending her small garden, and shielding her boy from the harshness of both nature and gossip. When she saw Ishaan, she did not welcome him warmly, but neither did she turn him away. "You are new here," she said, her tone clipped, as though weighing the risk of speaking too much. "I am," Ishaan admitted, adjusting the strap of his sack. "I've come with no place to stay. The village head told me this side of Killa was near empty." Her eyes narrowed, cautious yet calculating. Outsiders in Killa meant whispers, and whispers meant trouble. But something in the man's eyes, grief etched so deeply it softened his frame, kept her from refusing him outright. After a moment of silence, she stepped aside and gestured. "You may sit, at least until you find ground of your own." Ishaan broke the tension with his small voice. "Are you a soldier?" he asked Ishaan, his tone filled with wonder. Ishaan smiled faintly, shaking his head. "No, little one. I've only fought battles of another kind." The boy's laughter was quick and disarming, a sound that struck Ishaan unexpectedly, reminding him of the child he never had. The hours stretched into evening. Ishaan, though reserved, lent a hand by carrying water and mending a broken latch on Zahra's gate. He worked quietly, his movements steady, as though labor was the only language he still remembered. Zahra observed him, noting the absence of complaint, the absence of pride. She could not deny that a man's presence in her yard stirred unease, yet it also eased certain burdens she had carried alone for too long. When dusk settled, the hills darkened into silhouettes, and Ishaan nestled close to Ishaan as though instinct had guided him there. Zahra stiffened at the sight, torn between protectiveness and an inexplicable softness she had long suppressed. She had raised her boy without the warmth of a father, telling herself strength was enough. But watching Ishaan's small hand reach for Ishaan's, she felt the sharp pang of something missing, a presence, a steadiness that she alone could not provide. That night, Ishaan slept in the small shed beside Zahra's home, grateful for shelter. His dreams, however, betrayed him. He saw flashes of his late wife's face, blurred by shadows that slowly shifted into Zahra's silhouette. He awoke unsettled, the memory of longing pressing against his chest like a forbidden weight. He told himself it was grief playing tricks, yet he could not ignore the unease of how easily one woman's presence had slipped into the vacancy left by another. For Zahra, sleep came no easier. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, questioning her decision to let a stranger so near her son. Her husband had been gone for years, leaving her to bear both ridicule and responsibility. She had survived without a man, building a life from fractured pieces, refusing to bow to pity. And yet, in the stillness of night, she wondered if survival alone was enough. By morning, Killa stirred with its usual murmurs. Neighbors watched from afar, their eyes carrying curiosity sharp as blades. Zahra ignored them, as she always did, but she knew whispers had begun, whispers of the widower who had stepped into her yard, whispers of what it might mean. Ishaan rose with the sun and joined Zahra in her tasks without invitation. His presence was quiet, never overstepping, yet undeniable. Ishaan followed him closely, laughing at his clumsy jokes, shadowing his every move. And though Zahra kept her expression guarded, her heart betrayed her with its quiet flutter each time her gaze lingered too long. The first day in Killa ended as it had begun, with silence, with distance, yet with an invisible thread binding the three together. Ishaan did not yet belong, Zahra did not yet trust, and Ishaan did not yet understand. But the seed of something dangerous had been planted in the soil of loneliness. And as night fell again, Ishaan whispered into the dark, "I did not come here to find love." Yet deep within, he already knew the conflict had begun, not with the villagers, not with Zahra, but within the restless chambers of his own heart. The unseen thread. Days in Killa did not follow the rhythm of the city. They stretched longer, measured not by clocks but by the sun's patient arc across the sky. For Ishaan, each dawn brought work that steadied his mind, hauling water, mending fences, turning the soil that Zahra had long battled alone. He did not ask permission to help. He simply did, and Zahra, though reluctant at first, grew used to his presence. Ishaan became the bridge between them. The boy followed Ishaan everywhere, clutching his hand as though he had always been part of their lives. "Tell me a story," he would plead in the evenings, his eager eyes fixed on the widower. Ishaan, though no master of tales, would weave fragments of memory into gentle fables. Ishaan listened wide-eyed, laughing at the silly parts, and sometimes Zahra found herself listening too, her guarded heart softening against her will. Still, Zahra wrestled with unease. She had lived long enough in Killa to know the cruelty of gossip. A lone woman sharing her household, even briefly, with a man she barely knew. Whispers were inevitable. She heard them already at the well, felt the weight of sidelong glances. Yet when she thought of sending Ishaan away, Ishaan's disappointed face rose before her eyes, and the thought curdled into guilt. Ishaan himself was no stranger to this tension. At night, when the shed grew quiet, he thought of his wife, her laughter, her tenderness, the way she used to wait for him at the door. Grief still pressed heavy on his chest, and yet, during the day, his eyes betrayed him. He noticed the way sunlight slipped across Zahra's face, the way she brushed back loose strands of hair while working, the quiet strength in her shoulders. He told himself it was admiration, nothing more, but desire crept in silently, disguised as gratitude. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence, Ishaan felt Zahra's gaze linger. She stood nearby, watching him drive nails into wood with steady rhythm. He looked up suddenly, catching her eyes, and for a heartbeat neither moved. Ishaan's voice broke the silence, calling for water, and the moment dissolved as quickly as it had formed. But both of them carried its echo long after. As the days turned into weeks, Ishaan's attachment deepened. He began to call Ishaan uncle, but soon slipped and said father when excitement carried him away. The first time, Zahra's hands froze in her work, her breath caught in her chest. Ishaan heard it too, the word striking him like both blessing and curse. The boy himself was unaware of the storm he had stirred, but for Zahra and Ishaan, the air grew heavier with meaning. That evening, Zahra confronted Ishaan beneath the fading light. "You must understand," she said quietly, her tone firm though her voice trembled. "Ishaan has lived without a father all his life. He does not know the weight of that word. You cannot encourage it." "I have not," Ishaan replied gently. "I would never take what is not mine. But the boy sees what he longs for, Zahra. That is not something I can stop." Her eyes hardened. Longing can destroy as much as it gives. Remember that. The words struck them both, for each carried their own longing, unspoken yet relentless. The following night, a storm swept over Killa, fierce winds rattling doors and windows. The shed where Ishaan slept leaked badly, and Zahra, after hesitation, called him inside. Ishaan curled between them as the rain lashed outside, his small frame warm and safe. Ishaan lay awake, inches from Zahra, the closeness unbearable. He could smell the faint trace of herbs in her hair, hear the rhythm of her breath. Their hands brushed once in the dark, accidental, yet neither pulled away immediately. When morning came, nothing had been said, nothing had been done, and yet everything had changed. The villagers noticed the shift first. Their whispers grew sharper, their stares more accusing. Zahra bore them with a stoic face, but inside, shame and defiance warred. Ishaan offered to leave, but the thought of losing his presence twisted something deep within her. Ishaan, oblivious to the undercurrents, clung tighter than ever, calling Ishaan father openly, proudly. Each time, Zahra's chest ached with a mix of fear and yearning she could not untangle. And so the days continued, balanced on the edge of something both dangerous and irresistible. Ishaan's grief was no longer the only conflict he carried. Now desire joined it, threading through his resolve, testing his strength. Zahra's solitude, once her shield, now became her enemy, whispering of need she had buried for too long. By the end of that week, both knew the truth. They were no longer strangers bound by circumstance. Something unspoken had taken root between them, and though they fought it silently, each night made the silence harder to bear. Crossing the line, the storm that had shaken Killa lingered in the air, even after the skies cleared. Roads were slick with mud, fences splintered, and the fields smelled of damp earth. But the greater storm was the one brewing quietly inside Zahra's home, where every glance and silence between her and Ishaan carried the weight of what had almost happened. In the days that followed, Zahra tried to distance herself. She busied her hands with chores, spoke to Ishaan only when necessary, and reminded herself of the whispers already circling the village. Yet no matter how hard she worked, her thoughts betrayed her. She recalled the warmth of his hand brushing haze in the darkness, the steady rise and fall of his breathing beside her, the rare comfort of not feeling alone. Ishaan, too, was restless. He threw himself into repairs and labor, as though hammering wood and lifting stones could silence the growing ache within him. But each evening, when Ishaan ran to him with childish joy, or when Zahra's eyes met his for too long, his resolve weakened. He was a man torn between loyalty to the memory of his wife and a hunger for the life still left in him. One evening, after the work was done and Ishaan had fallen asleep early, Zahra stepped outside to gather herbs drying on the line. Ishaan followed, offering to help, though there was little to do. The air was cool, the horizon bruised with the last traces of twilight. Zahra worked in silence, but Ishaan felt words pressing against his chest. "You've carried so much alone," he said quietly. "No one should have to bear that weight forever." Her hands stilled, the herbs slipping between her fingers. "And yet, I have," she replied, "because there was no other choice." Their eyes met in the half-light. Ishaan took a step closer, his voice low. "Perhaps choice has come now." Zahra's breath caught, torn between fear and longing. She wanted to step back, to remind him of boundaries, of shame, of everything that would be lost. Yet her body betrayed her with stillness, with waiting. The silence between them deepened until it became unbearable. Ishaan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his hand trembling with restraint. Zahra closed her eyes, as though surrendering to something she could no longer fight. Their lips met, hesitant at first, then with the urgency of years of loneliness breaking free. The kiss was both a wound and a balm. It was comfort wrapped in guilt, hunger wrapped in fear. When they finally parted, Zahra's chest rose and fell as though she had run a great distance. Ishaan searched her face, his voice raw. "Tell me this is wrong, and I will stop." But she could not. The words lodged in her throat, silenced by the truth she dared not admit, that she wanted him, that she needed him. That night, when the house lay silent and Ishaan slept soundly, the line they had fought so long to protect dissolved completely. Their union was not of celebration but of desperation, two souls clinging to each other against the vast emptiness of their lives. Every embrace carried both tenderness and guilt, every whisper echoed with the memory of what had been lost. By morning, the weight of what they had done pressed down on them like the heavy clouds still hanging over Killa. Zahra avoided Ishaan's gaze, her face pale with unspoken conflict. Ishaan felt the shame equally, his heart torn by the image of his wife's face mingled with Zahra's. They had crossed into dangerous territory, and there was no returning to what had been before. The village soon caught the change. Though nothing was said aloud, eyes followed them with sharper judgment. Women at the well fell silent when Zahra approached. Men exchanged knowing glances when Ishaan passed by. The whispers had grown teeth. The harshest blow came not from the villagers, but from Ishaan himself. One afternoon, while tugging on Ishaan's arm in excitement, the boy shouted, "Father, come see." His innocent cry rang out clear across the fields, reaching every listening ear. Ishaan froze, Zahra's heart clenched, and the villagers nearby turned with smirks that cut deeper than any blade. Zahra scolded Ishaan gently, telling him not to use that word, but the damage was done. Gossip spread swiftly, claims that Zahra had taken a new man, that Ishaan had stolen another's place, that their household was marked by sin. That evening, Zahra confronted Ishaan in private, her eyes burning with both anger and grief. "Do you see what has happened? Do you see what we have brought upon ourselves?" "I did not ask him to call me that," Ishaan said, his voice steady but pained. "The boy wants what neither of us can give him without truth." Zahra turned away, her shoulders trembling. "And what truth is that, Ishaan?" "That I have betrayed the memory of my husband, that you have betrayed the memory of your wife." Her words fell like stones between them. Ishaan wanted to argue, to deny, but the silence stretched too long, and he knew she was right. They had filled the emptiness within themselves, but in doing so, they had carved a wound that would bleed into every corner of their lives. That night, the house was quiet again, but the quiet was no longer peace. It was the silence of two people who had stepped past the point of no return, bound now by a secret that could never be undone. Consequences. The weeks that followed were heavy with silence. Killa had always been a place of few words, but now its quiet carried sharp edges. Every time Zahra stepped outside, she felt the weight of eyes upon her. Women at the well no longer greeted her. Men smirked as though they knew truths never spoken aloud. The whispers had grown into verdicts, and Zahra, once proud of her resilience, found herself shrinking beneath their unseen trial. Ishaan bore the judgment too, though differently. Men approached him with mocking familiarity, slapping his back as if he had claimed a prize. Others stared with suspicion, muttering that no outsider could stay long without tainting what was sacred. For Ishaan, every glance was a reminder that his presence had not only altered his life but stained Zahra's reputation in ways he had never meant to. Ishaan, innocent of the storm he had stirred, continued in blissful ignorance. He called Ishaan father more openly now, unashamed and joyful, his laughter cutting through the tension like sunlight piercing cloud. To him, Ishaan's presence was not scandal or betrayal. It was belonging. The piece of his life he had never known was missing. One evening, Zahra sat by the fire, her face pale in the flickering light. Ishaan joined her, the air between them taut with unspoken questions. "I should leave," he said finally, his voice low. "Your name suffers because of me. I will not allow it to be destroyed." Zahra's hands clenched around the fabric of her dress. "And if you leave, what becomes of Ishaan? He will lose the only father he has ever known. Am I to tear that from him because of gossip?" "Gossip hardens into truth here," Ishaan replied. "I cannot bear to see you bear the punishment for what we have done." Her eyes lifted to his, burning with conflict. "And yet I cannot bear to see you go." The confession hung between them, fragile as glass. For a moment, it seemed they might surrender to their feelings again. But Zahra forced herself to look away. "We are bound by two ghosts, Ishaan, your wife and my husband. Whatever we try to build will always stand in their shadows. Perhaps that is our punishment." The following day, the village elders summoned Zahra. She stood before them, back straight, eyes steady, though inside she trembled. Their words were sharp, accusing her of dishonoring the memory of her husband, of shaming her household, of setting a poor example for other women. They did not name Ishaan directly, but the judgment was clear. When given the chance to speak, Zahra did not falter. "I have raised my son alone," she declared. "I have fought hunger, ridicule, and solitude, and I have done so without complaint. If kindness entered my home, if companionship eased my burden, does that make me a sinner? If so, then I accept your judgment, but I will not apologize for surviving." Her words stunned the gathering into silence. Some looked away, ashamed. Others hardened their expressions further. But Zahra did not lower her head. She walked away with Ishaan's small hand in hers, her dignity battered but not broken. That night, Ishaan came to her door, his face shadowed with resolve. "I will stay," he told her. "Not as your husband, not as your lover, but as Ishaan's protector, if you will have me. Let the village say what it will. The boy deserves more than silence and shame." Zahra studied him for a long moment, her heart torn. She wanted to embrace him, to admit that she longed for more than protection, more than duty. But she could not. The memory of a husband lingered still, and the guilt of her choices weighed too heavily. "You may stay," she said at last. "But we must live carefully. For Ishaan, for ourselves." And so they settled into a fragile balance. Ishaan remained by their side, working the land, guiding the boy, sharing unspoken glances with Zahra that carried both comfort and sorrow. Their bond was undeniable, yet restrained, an unfinished story written in pauses, a longing that dared not speak its name. Ishaan, too young to understand the complexities, flourished in the warmth of two figures he trusted. His laughter filled the house, his joy a fragile shield against the whispers that continued beyond their walls. In time, the gossip dulled, as all scandals do, but it never fully died. Zahra and Ishaan lived with it, carrying the weight of both love and betrayal, never quite free, never quite broken. On quiet nights, when the village slept and only the crickets sang, Ishaan sometimes whispered into the dark, "Was it love, or was it sin?" And beside him, though she never answered aloud, Zahra wondered the same. The story did not end with resolution, but with endurance. Two hearts bound by grief, temptation, and the fragile hope that perhaps, despite everything, they had found in each other a reason to go on.